afternoon, everyone. Welcome to At America. At America is the U.S. Embassy American Center, where our mission is to provide space for young Indonesian to express, explore, and experience American culture through our diverse range of programs, events, and excellent facilities we have. And today, our special talk is Unlocking Inclusive Education. In today's special talk, we will explore the transformative shift from segregated to inclusive classroom, focusing on its potential impact on Indonesian education. Let's discover high-impact strategies and embrace evidence-based practices for a brighter and more inclusive future. And also, we have a social media quiz for you, and the question is, what does inclusive education primarily aim to achieve? And the options are A, exclusive access to education, B, uniform teaching methods, C, equal access to quality education, or D, strict adherence to a single cultural framework. If you know the answer, you can submit it through our social media, and the first person who answered correctly will get a shout out from us at the end of our event. Now, let us hear the opening remarks that will be given from the Relo Director from the U.S. Embassy Jakarta to Ibu Ruth Goat. The time is yours.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. So I am Ruth Good. I am the director of the Regional English Language Office at the U.S. Embassy in Jakarta, and I am just delighted to be here this afternoon with you. I should say Selamat Siang. Sorry, I get my Siang and my Sore mixed up. So as you probably know, December is Disability Rights Awareness Month. We're here today because some months ago, the Ministry of Education, Research, Culture, and Technology issued Regulation 48 regarding adequate accommodations for students with disabilities and enhanced school facilities and training for teachers and administrators. So, as many countries around the world, Indonesia has been working for many years to improve access to education for people with disabilities. But this new legislation is a really important step that will help ensure that all children, regardless of their differences, will get the support they need to achieve their full educational potential and achieve their dreams. So on October 22nd this year, President Biden celebrated the 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act. That law banned discrimination on the basis of disability by any organization funded by the federal government. So President Biden, as we all are committed to supporting people with disabilities, both in the United States and around the world. So together with President Biden, the U.S. Embassy here in Jakarta hopes to continue doing what we can to support Indonesia in this important work of including people with disabilities in every aspect of society. A really important part of this, of course, is inclusive education. Every child has the right to education, whatever their physical or intellectual differences. If we exclude people with disabilities, we exclude those who have the potential to be great politicians, like Indonesia's President Abdurrahman Wahid, who I believe was almost blind, or former American President Roosevelt, who was in a wheelchair, or current President for Ecuador, Lenin Boltaer Moreno, who also uses a wheelchair. If we exclude people with disabilities, then you would never hear Putri Ariana, right? Or Emade Irawan, or Stevie Wonder, or Beethoven, who was almost completely deaf. If we exclude people with disabilities, we exclude scientists like Thomas Jefferson, who invented the light bulb, or Albert Einstein, who I recently discovered had difficulty reading. We all know somebody who is physically disabled or who has intellectual disabilities. All of us know somebody who needs a little help. And if not today, one day, all of us will become disabled. all of us, whether by old age, whether by an accident, or whether by an illness. All of us will one day become disabled. So let us work together to create a world where everyone is included and everybody can achieve their potential. But let us not pretend that this important work is easy. It takes time and commitment and resources. And despite the efforts of the last 60 years in the United States, we in the United States still have a long way to go. Like the United States, Indonesia is a huge country and will need a lot of work and commitment in the coming years to continue to build the awareness and skills and systems necessary to make sure that inclusive education is a reality for every student from Senang to Merauke. That's a big country, right? We are very honored to be able to support Indonesia in this important work. And that's why in October we sent 5 special needs educators to University of Massachusetts Lowell for a 3-week exchange, I think 3 weeks, to study special education. And that is why we are absolutely delighted to welcome Dr. Dean Cloward, an expert in special needs education with 30 years of experience in the field. So with that, I would like to turn it over to our moderator. Actually, let me turn it back here. And thank you so much for joining us today. We'll look forward to the conversation.
Thank you so much to Ibu Ruth Goat as the Regional Director from the U.S. Embassy Jakarta. And now I would like to invite our moderator today. She is the Head of English Studies Program, Faculty of Humanities, Universitas Indonesia, to Dr. Asri Saraswati. The stage is yours.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's discussion at America. The title of today's discussion is Unlocking Inclusive Education. We are so happy today that we are able to welcome our distinguished guest, an expert in special education. I would like to invite to the podium Dr. Dean Cloward from Brigham Young University. Let's give a round of applause.
Thank you.
Welcome, Dr. Dean. So you have a presentation to share with us. Perhaps we can start with that.
I do.
Okay.
Selamat siang. Good afternoon. I'm learning a little bit of Indonesian. I've been here in Indonesia for 2 weeks, and I'm amazed at what a great nation, full of resources. The best of those resources, the richest of those resources is the people. We have got to see that beginning with the Constitution of Indonesia and extending through the people and the leadership, that you value inclusion. Your leaders in government, in schools, in organizations, in the advocacy groups that we've met with, and in the universities also value inclusion. I'm impressed with the teachers and the students, and especially the parents that we've met, that are anxious to see change and anxious to support that change. I'm grateful for the warm hospitality I've received from so many of you. Thank you. So I have some slides I'd like to just go through with you. And the first is here with Mahatma Gandhi. Mahatma Gandhi says the true measure of any society can be found in how it treats its most vulnerable members. Gandhi was referring to all who are marginalized. It begs the question, how are we doing? What could we do better? And how could we be more inclusive? I think it's a question that every society must ask, and we must address as a world. I'd like to begin by introducing just what inclusion is. Okay. So let's go through just some principles here. The first of those principles is zero reject. Zero reject, in fact, if it's okay, do you care if I walk around the stage? Zero reject really means that, that no matter who you are, you should be accepted in school, should be accepted in the workplace, that we reject no one. That's a pretty significant principle, and one that I'm aware of isn't achieved by any nation in the world completely yet. So everyone needs to work on that first one. The second principle is non-discriminatory evaluation. And what that means is that we need to use strategies of assessment and evaluating students in schools that don't discriminate against them based on disability, but also based on poverty status, gender, and many of the other things that would make somebody marginalized, so that we assess fairly. The next is free and appropriate public education. So addressing the first one, free would mean that there is no cost, not only for school, but for any of the services that might be provided a child. Because if we charge for any service, ultimately we discriminate against those in poverty. So it is critical that it be free. The second part of that is that it's appropriate. And what that means is that it meets the needs of the child. Now that seems pretty straightforward and easy, but the reality is that making school appropriate to each and every child, specific to that one child's needs, is a fairly daunting task for a school, and especially for a teacher. So free and appropriate. The next is least restrictive environment. Now that's a fairly confusing term, but what that means is that we don't exclude a child from a classroom where that child's own friends are. So that every child should be able to attend school with the children from his own neighborhood. Well, that isn't happening consistently anywhere in the world. And we need to do better at that. We need to be in a place where a child shows up at the front door of the school and that child is welcomed freely into that classroom. And that they're provided the things that they need to succeed. And we'll talk more about that one later. The next is procedural due process. This is a principle that protects the rights of the child and the disabled child and the child's parents in the process of being educated. So it gives the parent the right to give informed consent, written consent, before the school decides to do something different with that child than they would do with others. It gives the rights to the parent to be informed about changes in the child's schooling. It gives them the right to be represented if there's a concern with when there's a disagreement between what the parent wants to do and what the school wants to do. The school doesn't just proceed forward. There's a process that allows for mediation between the parent and the school, and if that doesn't resolve it, then even a hearing to assure that the parent's rights and specifically the child's rights are represented in the process. And the last is family student participation. It gives the parents the right to come to team meetings with that child's teacher and with others at the school as they write the individualized education plan for the child. Every parent, and when the child's old enough, every student has a right to participate in the planning of their education. And that extends all the way through high school as we begin to prepare that child to transition out into the public world and on into vacations, their vocation, or the university. So the goals of inclusive education are, first, that we teach them to be self-reliant and independent. That would mean that that each child is expected to do their very best, and oftentimes higher than we think they can achieve, that we help them to succeed, and that we have high expectations and high love. The second goal is that of the disabled child's peers. That disabled child's peers should have the opportunity to interact with, tutor, and assist that disabled child to succeed. And in so doing, the typical peer tends to progress faster. And then the next is the opportunity of the disabled child and the disabled child's family to be integrated into society, where friendships and positive relationships result. And then the last two are more broad, one of unity and the other of equity. Everyone should have the opportunity to have equal access to everything that everyone else has access to. And that's that last principle. So I'd like to teach you about a process that comes from universal design from learning, and that is called designing for the margins. When we design for the margins, for example, you can see the stroller crossing the street, and then down below the wheelchair coming up across the curb. When we cut the curb down so the wheelchair can come across, we also allow others the same accessibility, like the mom in the stroller, or like the person on a bike, or somebody pulling luggage. That curb cut benefits everyone else, not just the disabled person. And the same with an elevator, working the same way. So designing for the margins allows us to take care of both ends, and that's what it means. I'm designed for my lowest people and my highest functioning people. And by designing for the high end and the low end, I take care of everyone in the middle. And in ways oftentimes we don't even expect. So that's the principle. Designing for the margins takes care of everyone in the middle. So now I'd like to transition to talking about why a nation would want to know or want to promote inclusive education. And sorry, I don't speak Bahasa Indonesian, so I have to have my notes in English so I know where I am. So the first principle there is that as we increase training and education for disabled children, it increases their ability to participate in the workforce, and it increases the number of people that are self-reliant. And in so doing, I reduce the number of people that are dependent upon public aid. Well, that should be of interest to any government, because I get a better trained, better participating workforce. And those that are in the workforce participate at a higher level. So, and this is fairly significant research. And what it says is if I don't invest early on in the child, then by consequence, I have lower academic gains and less literacy. Parents reduce their participation in the workforce and miss work days. They fail to join and contribute to the community. They require more assistance in schools and will not be included in the regular classroom. And as a consequence, later in life, they have increased misconduct, resulting in greater need for policing and greater likelihood that they will be imprisoned. They become more dependent on public assistance for daily survival. And last, an inability to contribute to the country and community welfare. Where, if I switch those roles, investing the same dollars that would have been invested later in life, if I invest them in the at-risk child early in life, then I get some different gains and reduce. And in fact, before I go through the rest of the slide, let's just talk really quickly about what an at-risk child means. An at-risk child is not just the child with a disability. It's a child that comes from poverty, a child that has a second language, or a child that comes from trauma. So by investing early in those at-risk children, I have increased skills towards self-reliance, more meaningful friendships with diverse friend groups. I have an increased confidence of that child to engage in the community beyond school, empathy for peers towards others, increased parent participation in the school and the child's life in productive ways, and increased inclusion in activities outside of the school, like universities. And as a consequence, later in life, I have a lowered risk of misconduct and crime, less dependence on public assistance. It contributes to the community and county and country welfare. Parents are more engaged in the community. And research recently in the last 10 years, particularly from Vietnam, shows actual cognitive gains because of early investments in early education. So how do we go about this? Well, first, I think it's important to know that the United States has made lots of mistakes. And it's taken us 60 years to get where we are. We've been slow. But other countries have not been so slow. As we've seen already in Indonesia, the pace is faster. And the pace is faster because there's a political will and community commitment to change. Two, there's a whole body of research that people can draw from in schools, in universities, in families that tell us what works and what doesn't work. That the United States didn't have when it started its journey, that Indonesia will be able to benefit from. And some of that research has been produced by Indonesian scholars themselves. So that is worth looking at. It's gonna take several, and particularly 4 significant steps. The first, we need to train the teacher workforce that's coming out of universities at present. And that means training not only special education teachers, but it means training primary and secondary teachers that teach in inclusive classrooms. And in fact, we need to put more training there probably than anywhere we put it, because that is the group that's going to help lead the charge on inclusive education. The second one is to build the capacity of existing teachers. And that is a huge undertaking. We're talking hundreds of thousands of teachers across Indonesia that will need to have additional skills to be able to do this. They can't feel like they're expected to do it without training and support. They need to do this together, and they need to do it with support from the community. And that support doesn't just come from government. It comes from parents, it'll come from community leaders, it'll come from religious leaders, as well as government. So it's critical that those teachers get that kind of support. The next is parent involvement. Some parents are already involved, anxiously engaged in this cause. But some parents with disabilities and parents without disabilities still struggle to know what to do. And they're going to need encouragement. Their hearts are going to have to change. They're going to have to be told, you can do this, and your child can do this. And the last is to increase resource availability to teachers and to schools. Now, that's going to come from a variety of resources, and it's not all going to come from government. It'll come from community organizations, it'll come from parents in the community, but it'll also come from organizations outside of the typical places you might think, even businesses that will contribute technologies and support to make this change happen. I have just a couple more slides that just really quickly, and they're sayings that I think illustrate the principle I want to teach. First, this is hard work. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, "That which we persist in doing becomes easier to do. Not that the nature of the thing has changed, but our power to do so is increased." It's the persistence in doing hard things that makes hard things easy. The next is changing attitudes. We need to change attitudes in parents. We need to do it in general education teachers. We need to do it in the public. And we need to have our government leaders and our legislators. Whoops, I skipped one, I think. There we go. We need everyone involved, and it's going to take time. Hearts don't change quickly. But the message needs to be out there in our public media, in our conversations, and in the things that we see and do just with each other. We need to demonstrate and model inclusive practices. And then the last one is teamwork. And I love that saying, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So, Indonesia, you can do this. Do it together. These are just some resources I've gathered online that you can have access to. And we will be updating this page regularly to add resources to it that we feel will be of benefit. Most of them are in English, but I've given you instructions on how to use Google Translate to translate these resources.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Cloward. Let's give another round of applause for the wonderful, inspiring talk that Dr. Cloward just given us.
Thank you.
So there's so many things I'm still trying to take in. There's so many information. So this is resources that everybody can access. It's free. Some of them are in English, and it's useful for teachers.
Yes.
Inclusive education.
And I'm going to try and look for some resources here in Indonesia. We know of some now, and I'll post those there as well.
Okay, wonderful. And I should also mention that Dr. Cloward has been spending his days almost 2 weeks now to various cities in Indonesia, meeting with organizations who are advocating for students with disability, teachers. Who else did you?
Administrators, universities, parents, advocacy individuals, as well as groups.
Wow, okay. So you are well aware of the situation on the ground right now.
That's right. We started in Jakarta, and we even met with the Moni and Monas, or Mona, the original religious affairs, and with the national education. And then that was in Jakarta. We went on to Medan, and then to Banda Aceh, and then down to Surabaya, and now we're back here in Jakarta.
I see. In 2 weeks, so a packed schedule.
It was.
Okay, so from your observation, meeting so many people along the way, do you see the case in Indonesia as something unique or similar with other countries, or what is your opinion about the situation in our country in terms of providing support for students with disability?
Yeah, before I came, we thought, we don't even know we know what the law says. We have some idea of how some people are doing this, but we really had no idea what this looked like on the ground. And so we surveyed, we sent out a survey to teachers and parents, mostly just teachers and administrators nationwide that we had connections to, and brought in survey data to get some sense of it. But we really didn't fully understand until we started going from school district to school district and group to group and had a chance to talk to them. And we have a really good sense now that the people are committed to the change, and that the change is happening, and in some places faster than others, and in some places with more rich resources than others, but everyone's on board. We saw no resistance. And so we were openly impressed with what's happening here in Indonesia.
So everybody is committed to change. Everybody is committed towards inclusive education.
Yes.
And shows their commitment to it.
And despite that commitment, this is still not easy.
Yeah.
It'll still be a hard road. In fact, I have been doing this for 30 years, and 30 years ago, as I started my career, we began to develop, for the first time, fully inclusive classrooms. And I remember back then thinking, we need this resource, but we didn't have it. And parents that would say, I don't want my non-disabled child in that classroom with a disabled child. And disabled parents that would say, I'm not sure my child's ready to go to a regular school. I want them to be in a special classroom by themselves. And we still see that some today. But what we saw is that just the persistent collaboration between teachers and parents and school administrators and even local community leaders, that regular dialogue creates change. Because even without resources, they found creative ways to meet children's needs that always surprised me. I thought, wow, that's creative. I didn't even think of that. We could have done this expensive route, but they found a better way. In fact, one of the first things that I saw, we had a child in a wheelchair that couldn't hold his own book. So they needed a book holder, and the book holder was expensive. They made one out of PVC pipe for dollars. And I thought, you know, if there's a will and a desire, they'll find a way.
That's correct. Okay, wow, give another round of applause for that wonderful, strong message. Another thing, when you mentioned about collaboration, something that I didn't thought about is you mentioned that it's also important to empower the peers of the student with disability. We often think about, when we talk about collaboration, we think about, okay, so the teachers needs to support them, the parents, but we rarely thought about the role of the friends within the classrooms. Because sometimes the other students, probably us, is also just looking to get a better grade. They do not know how to support their friends. So do you have any suggestion on that?
I do. And in fact, one of the risks in putting a disabled child in a regular school without the right supports is that they'll get bullied. That the other children will bully that child and be mean to them, say rude things to them, and in some cases even do, you know, harmful things to that child. So that's a real risk. But there's some simple things you can do to overcome it. One is to model that practice as adults, that we model how we teach and how we treat them. But one of the powerful things I saw early on in my career is a mom brought her disabled child to school and said, can we just talk to the class? So on the first day of class, that mom and that child came up and sat in front of the class, and the mom said, this is my son, and talked about what his disability was. But then they spent the next minutes, in fact, an extended period of time, just letting the children ask questions. And as they asked questions, the barriers between the typical children and the disabled child just went down. That's a powerful thing. To most of the time when we bully or when we treat somebody inappropriately, it's because our hearts haven't connected. And if we can connect hearts, bullying goes down, the risk goes down.
Because when we think about inclusive education, we thought that just having the student with disability within the classroom, then our job is done, right? It turns out that many students with disability, although they are already in the same classroom, they still feel isolated somehow because of those walls that you mentioned, that probably they did not receive the same treatment, or other peers are reluctant to talk to them or support them. So.
Yeah, that's right. And some children are at greater risk of that isolation. A child who is deaf, for example, doesn't participate in the typical conversations that are occurring in class because they're not hearing those conversations. And so finding ways to bridge and bring that child in to the circle of friends is a critical part of that transition. Children with autism, for example, oftentimes exhibit behavior that other children are a little scared of. And so helping the other children know what to do and how to treat and how to teach that child, again, brings that child back into the circle of friends. So two principles here that relate. First, disabled children learn language faster from their peers than they do from adults.
Wow.
So having that disabled child in the classroom engaging with their peers, their language will progress faster. But the other one that's really important is that we learn social rules. We learn how to act in public from our peers. Now, my mom taught me to say please and thank you, but when I got out into the community and I burped out loud or I did some other thing that was inappropriate, my friends looked at me funny, and I thought, "Ooh, I'm not doing that again." Our peers teach us. And so those are powerful principles. As we bring that disabled child in the classroom, those peers will take on that child and help them to progress, as long as we, as the adults, support and encourage that.
I see. And the peers also benefit from having the disabled student inside their classroom, right?
That's right. And in fact, some of the early concerns of parents were that the typical child, my typical child, won't progress academically as fast. The research doesn't bear that out. The research suggests that the typical children will actually progress faster because they'll be teaching and engaged with children that are at different levels and more diverse. In fact, we know that. That's why universities bring in diverse student body, because they know that a diverse student body produces better long-term academic gains than a homogeneous group. So having that diversity in the classroom helps the child to progress. But more important than the academic gains, think about the things that we learn when we deal with somebody that's different from ourselves. Citizenship skills like patience and love and concern for the welfare of others. Those are skills in a classroom that are actually more important long-term in the child's life than the academic gains.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. There's a number of audience here inside. Perhaps I can ask, give opportunity if anybody would like to throw a question. Yes.
Thank you, Ibu. Is it working?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Cloward. I missed your discussion in my university last Monday.
Yes.
And I was moderating in next door building. So I have this one question that been on my mind for many, many years. Okay, inclusive education, would gifted students be included there or not?
I think they are.
They are. As
Yeah.
I was working on my...
So the question is, let me make sure I'm clear. The question is, do gifted students benefit by these same principles?
That would be much better question. Yeah.
So
That's what I meant.
think about teaching to the margins. When I design my curriculum for the margins, I'm planning for my highest students and my lowest. That isn't the way we used to teach. We used to teach to the middle, right? In fact, I still struggle with that as a university professor. I go in and I think that I'm teaching to this middle group, and then I struggle to meet my high and my low end. But if I design for my highest students and for my lowest students, my middle students are taken care of. So yes, gifted children are benefited by this because I've designed curriculum just for them. Does that answer your question?
Just for them?
Well, I'm designing curriculum for all my students, but I've started by talking about what do my highest students need? My gifted students, what do they need?
Okay, got it. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, because historically because we've designed for the middle, we've forgotten about that gifted student. And so we're teaching and they're already done learning and they're bored and they're doing other things because I didn't design for that gifted student, right? By designing for them to begin with, I've engaged them at their level. Right? And that goes back to some principles, what we call zone proximal development. So we're going to think about 3 zones, right? My high students, my middle students, my low, and I'm going to teach to the full range. Yeah.
Okay. There's one question from the audience who are joining with us through online. Sorry. how can the assessment and evaluation method fairly measure the progress and achievement in an inclusive setting? So that is one of, and if you are creating for the highest as well as the lowest, right?
That's right. But sometimes, like even in the United States, we have tests that the same test is given to all children. Well, and there's a place for that. I wouldn't say we just don't do that, because we need to know where they are relative to some standard.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm measuring math and the child can't read, and it's a story problem,
Yeah.
even if the child could do well at the problem, they're going to fail the problem because they can't read. So I didn't assess that child's math ability.
Mm-hmm.
I assessed how well they could read, even though it was a math problem. And that's where non-discriminatory assessment comes in. I have to understand what my target skill is that I'm trying to measure, and how that child is going to access that target skill.
Mm-hmm.
And I need to make sure I've gotten rid of any access barriers so that they can demonstrate the target.
Mm-hmm.
That's a real critical part of what non-discriminatory assessment is. And it's a challenge. It requires us to be creative and think, okay, I've got this assessment, how am I going to do it? What is this child going to need to access that exam? And now, that's for standardized exams that all students take. But most of the assessment I'm going to do as a teacher on a daily basis can be individualized to each child. I can give this child a different exam than I give this child, and a different one for this child. And that's even more powerful, because now I really have designed an assessment that's specific for that child, and where I know they are and where I expect them to be. Mm-hmm. Where I can say, this is the goal, here's my baseline, here's my assessment strategy to assess where they're capable of being.
I see. So these are the assessment has to be tailor-made, have to consider the capability of each student. Within the classroom, if there are 3 students with disability, it may be 3 different ways of assessing?
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. And that's why the demand for inclusive teachers is going to go up. It's going to be harder for an inclusive teacher than for a teacher that has no children with disabilities. They're going to have to spend a little more time, and they're going to need some more support. Mm-hmm. And so that'll be one of the things that over the coming years we'll build in. Indonesia will build into the system. And they've already begun doing that. They're sending special education teachers to help general education teachers mm-hmm. to implement these, so that they do have that extra support. Mm-hmm. But that's going to have to be ongoing, because this is a significant demand upon inclusive teachers.
I see. And I'm sure as you move around, as you visited so many different places, the ministries and so on, some of the things that I've heard is the number of special ed teachers is quite low in Indonesia. But then again, somebody mentioned that it's almost the same case in all over the world. Is that true? Or?
That's true. No matter where we go in the world, there's not enough teachers. General education teachers or special education teachers. Now, some nations are doing better at this. Finland, for example, has been leading the world in recent years to say, we value education, we're going to pay our teachers more, we're going to hire more of them, and when you pay more, it's easier to hire more. But most nations are not there. Even the United States is not there. We cannot hire enough general education and special education teachers. There's a shortage.
Okay. Yeah. But if we create a condition, provide serious assessment, there will be a need and demand for more teachers to be educated.
That's right.
So it will
and then
push factor.
And then universities then are going to have to then begin to ramp up their preparation process as well, right? Because at least in the United States, we don't have enough special ed programs nationwide to train enough teachers either. So we're expanding the number of programs and the number of students we take into each program.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This relates with a question that we received through online as well about what training and professional development opportunities should be provided to teachers to equip them with the skills needed for inclusive education.
I think the training needs to be threefold. One, they need to get really good training while they're at the university. And that training needs to be more than just lecture-based. They need opportunities to have practicum experiences out in the classroom, really working with teachers. And it needs to be not just in the final year of their program. They need to have experiences clear back at the beginning of their sophomore year and in their junior year and in their senior year, so that we're building skills besides just teaching principles. So that's the first. We need to train our teachers well at the university level. 2, we need to provide ongoing opportunities for in-service training for teachers that are currently hired and working in schools. And that needs to be an ongoing, all of the time opportunity. And there needs to be enough of it that teachers can pick and choose, and they can say, oh, I'm good at that skill, I don't need that one, but I need this one, and they can plan that in to their training process. And then the last thing is there needs to be a way to recertify teachers, to be able to say, you got this training 5 years ago, but some of it's already out of date. To be able to be certified again, you need to have this many training experiences. And in some cases, we even say, you need to be able to demonstrate you know it. So by doing that, we continue to raise the quality of our teachers.
So,
And we're doing it because we're providing support, and in some cases, even monetary support, to be able to say, here's some extra money to be able to go to that training, or we provide the training for free.
so I think one of the cases that we have today, there was a discussion held by the Himpunan Guru-Guru Berkebutuhan untuk Siswa Berkebutuhan Khusus, the organization for professional organization for teachers, special ed teachers. So, well, in that discussion, one of the experiences of the general ed teachers is that she's teaching senior high school. She's not educated or she's not trained in special education, and suddenly receive a student with disability. So this idea of students, the general ed teachers, are not equipped with the skills, perhaps not educated in special education. So one solution can be, from what you mentioned, to create a recertification program in which the teachers be re-educated with the skills of special ed. Is that okay?
That's right. And there's the other additional things we can do. One of the fastest ways to learn and make progress is in professional learning communities. So a grade level team, all the 3rd grade teachers, for example, would meet together on a weekly basis and say, this is what I'm struggling with my disabled child. And then I have my peers that then say, well, this is, you should try this. That weekly dialogue with my peers will help me not only to learn, but feel supported, so I don't feel alone in this. Because when we get a disabled child into our classroom, it's scary for the first time. Yeah. And until we've done it for some time, it can be overwhelming. And so to have a group of peers with me that say, you can do this, and here's some ideas for you, is really helpful.
So it's a huge undertaking for a teacher.
It is.
Yeah. So you mentioned as well, the example that you mentioned is to have the parent there, or parent introducing the student. The parent can, what roles do you think the parent can do in this setting?
The parent, in the United States, we would not have changed to become where we are with inclusive education if it weren't for parents. Parents drove the change. Parents are the ones that created the organizations, the Council for Exceptional Students and the Association of Retarded Citizens. Those were spawned by parents. Now, they're national organizations now that are driven by professionals in the community and so on, but they started with parents. And so parents are going to be a huge force for good in this change. And their force for change with dealing with disabled people will have impacts elsewhere in the community, because now there'll be a more integrated member of the community. And so inclusive practices that were designed for children with disabilities, they'll have impacts on inclusivity for gender and inclusivity for poverty and so on. So parents are going to play a significant role in this. So they need to be included in committees at the school. We need to ask parents, so what do you think we should do with your child? Especially when we're struggling. You know, when that child is demonstrating a behavior and we don't know what to do, the parent sometimes will already know what to do. And just saying, help me. And the parent will say, well, try this. And even if they don't know, having them part of the team increases my success in my classroom, but it also increases the probability that this child will be successful. So for example, if I'm focusing on reading strategies at school, to be able to tell the parent, this is what we're doing, this is what I want you to do when the child gets home, and I want you to read every night with your child for half an hour. Now I've extended what I've done in the classroom to the home environment. I remember when our children were little, I have 6 children, and I remember teaching my son, who was fairly young, learning to read, and as we would go around the city, I would say, what's that sign say? What's that sign say? And when we'd go to a restaurant, I'd hand him the menu and see how many words he could pick out. Because I've taken the reading beyond the school and I brought it into my home and into our life, change happens faster. He learned to read faster. So parents are going to be a critical part of this.
So I'm sure you notice as well that usually the challenges that students with disability have, or families with a disabled child, also go hand in hand with poverty. Sometimes the family are not thinking about success beyond K-12 or senior high school. Perhaps they could not imagine, perhaps their aim is to put their child in school, having somebody there to at least educate some basic skills, survival skills for the child. Do you encourage parents to imagine even bigger objective, or perhaps they're not thinking about having the child becoming a successful president, like what Ibu Ruth mentioned? So what are your suggestions for families who have this kind of?
That's a great question. And in fact, we know that disabilities don't change in percentage across economic status. That the percentages are the same, but the outcomes are different. Children born to wealthy parents are going to have better outcomes. Disabled children who are born to wealthy parents are likely to have better long-term outcomes than children born to parents of poverty. But that can change, right? In fact, we've shown that. And in fact, there's some great research that came out of Jamaica where they gave just a little extra nutrition and taught parents how to give a little extra stimulation, and then studied it longitudinally. It wasn't just a short-term study, and showed that they had dramatic improvement in long-term outcomes for the child. And when they looked at it, it wasn't just that there was better outcomes in terms of like academics and social skills, vocational skills, but for example, there was health outcomes. For example, fewer heart attacks, less mental health issues, and so on. It's a great study that just really looks at small changes, particularly in the first 3 years of life, have long-term positive outcomes for children.
And this is from a nutrition that is given to
Yeah, 2, nutrition and stimulation. In fact, the study looked at what happens if we just give extra nutrition, what happens if we just give extra stimulation, and what happens if I give both. And in all 3 cases, children progressed faster. But when they were given both, they progressed even faster than the other 2 cohorts.
I see. So it seems depending on the support that you give to the child and your idea of success for that child, you help the child grow and develop.
That's right.
Right, along with our own imagination of the success that the child can gain. Right?
That's right. And I think it's really important for parents and for teachers to have high expectations and high love.
Wow.
And those have to come in combination. High expectations without love only leaves the child feeling like they're doing this alone and that they can't do it. High love without high expectations makes them comfortable to do nothing. It has to be high expectations and high love to produce long-term gains.
I see. That's interesting because usually when we are supporting students with disability, we think about, well, let's just make the exam easier, or not setting the high expectation because there's this fear that the child may not make it or might not achieve the same goal. But the idea of high expectation means don't lower.
That's right.
Your
Don't
aim.
lower the standard.
Okay.
Because if I say that, the implicit message in saying, I'm going I'm going to make this easier for you, is that the implicit message sent to the child is, I don't think you can really do it. Right? We want to say, you're capable of this. And even if they fail, then the message is, try again. You keep trying at that. Now, we can set it way too high and only frustrate the child, so we have to be reasonable and say, well, what's the next highest level? And that's where zone proximal development comes in, is to understand what that next highest level is, and that comes from really good assessment. But no, we should always push them to be their very highest and very best, and understand that failure is good. Failure is good. It teaches. And it teaches more than just what we're trying to get them to do. It teaches resilience. It teaches them to press through hard times. And that has long-term wonderful implications.
And that other point, high love, that might be, I mean, perhaps teachers are looking to make the students independent or reluctant to show, expressions of love in the classroom setting can be a bit difficult to navigate as well. Do you have any?
Yeah. One, having high expectations is a demonstration of love. When I combine it with just simple things, compliments on and specific feedback on how well they did and why that benefits them and how it pleases me that they're trying. But even things like a touch on the shoulder, eye contact, can be powerful demonstrations of love and commitment to success.
Wonderful. Another thing that I'm sure another challenge that school often face is facilities, right? So
right.
People would think that, well, support and accommodation for students with disability requires technology. It requires sophisticated software. So how do you think schools can get around that if they do not have the support that they need?
I think you'll see, as we have in the United States, that one, government funding will come. It's never enough, but government funding will come. But as government funding comes, I think you'll begin to see that other sources begin to provide funding and assistance. For example, it is not uncommon in the United States for a teacher to say, I need this technology, and to be able to put it out in the public space, and somebody out there that has the resource to say, fine, we'll give it to you for free, because they know where it's going. When somebody, it's different than saying, I need more money. If I could just say, please, I need assistance with this specific resource, the funding usually comes, the resource usually comes to help. And specific technologies, we call these assistive technologies. Some of them are essential, but some of them can be like the book holder. That's an assistive, very simple assistive technology, but sometimes we'll find another workaround as well that we can just build ourselves or ask somebody in the community to help us with.
There was also this fidget spinner, right?
That's right.
Can help student focus. It's such a simple equipment, but something that can be used within the classroom.
That's right.
To help students. So,
yeah. Okay. I think sometimes we think assistive technology has to be big and expensive, and it's not always.
Okay. There is this, so the question about, you introduced a category before, the at-risk child.
Right.
So student with disability is included within that category, but you also mentioned it can also be children with trauma. It can be immigrant, asylum seekers, or student who doesn't learn English in an American setting, or perhaps Indonesian setting, as well as poverty. So it really opens way in a way that we think about inclusive education. It's not just for student with disability, but all of these different categories, right?
That's right. You know, we live in an age where refugees are commonly seen through all of our communities worldwide now. And I think we have to think about, how do I include that refugee child, or a child that's even just moved, like here in Indonesia, how many languages are spoken in outlying areas? And if that family comes to Jakarta, how am I going to include that child who doesn't feel part of this culture or doesn't have the language to be successful? And I think we just have to think more broadly, how can I be more inclusive?
Yeah. In Indonesia, there's this category of when students apply to enter a public school, the student, there's a special inclusive, category of student who lost a parent because of COVID, or students from the orphanage. So inclusive education can also think about including students with such background as well, right?
That's right. That's right.
Okay. There's another question here from Twitter about what impact does, from Dimas from Twitter, what impact does inclusive education have on the social and emotional development of students with and without disability?
Yeah, and I think we've talked just a little bit about that already. But when children with disabilities are included in situations where they have high expectations, where I have meaningful friendships, they're less likely to feel anxious, they're less likely to have depression. We know this not just from our own experiences teaching children, but we see this in the research. The research backs this up, is that when any child, not just children with disability, when I bring them into an inclusive setting and I make them feel part of the community, they're more resilient long term. Now, the question is how does this impact a child who's not disabled or who's not at risk in some other way? One, I would say all of us are at risk in some way, a little. And we have a tendency to hide our own disabilities. But when we are in a context where we're with lots of diverse people, all of us having some at-risk issues, then I'm more likely to feel comfortable in disclosing my own concerns, my own disabilities, and to feel that I'm going to be included and I won't be rejected because of my different nature. So when we create diverse classrooms, cultures, communities, where inclusivity is the primary principle, we make everyone feel more welcome, more likely to be engaged. And when people are more engaged in the community, they're more likely to make progress.
I see. You also mentioned about the cognitive gains.
Yes.
That is, does that happen to the student with disability or the peers of students?
Yes, the study looked at children that had cognitive disabilities like Down syndrome and then tracked them for years. Okay. And the study just showed a 2 to 3 point gain in IQ for those children who had early intervention as opposed to those who didn't.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And that's pretty significant.
Yeah. And that is students who are within the inclusive environment who would receive such stimulation and development. Okay. Wow, wonderful. Another issue that right nowadays we are very familiar with is mental health issues.
Yes.
So this is, I think, a more tricky form of disability because it's invincible. How does inclusive education, does it open way to discuss about this or to include this? Or?
Yes, in fact, we know that, for example, bullying isn't only directed at children with disabilities, right? Bullying is something that is pervasive in many societies, in fact, most societies across the earth. In fact, just some recent research from Sweden, I think it was Sweden, anyway, the Scandinavian countries, showed that creating a classroom that children have greater leadership in, and where they're given empowerment to create inclusive contexts, that children have less anxiety and less depression, and that bullying is dramatically reduced, if not eliminated. So we know that some of the anxiety and depression that children and adults are subject to is the result of the culture in which they live and the messages they're receiving. So if we can change that culture, we're going to reduce the type of anxiety and depression that some people have. Now, that's not going to take care of all of it. Some depression and some anxiety, for example, are genetic. They're inherited, but even putting them in a culture that's more inclusive will help. It probably won't eliminate it, and there'll be other things that we need to do. But having an inclusive environment says, if you need to step away from the group because you're overwhelmed, it's okay. Rather than demanding that they stay present in the classroom. right? So inclusivity still is manifest in how I deal with that child with depression or anxiety, like a child with autism. They often feel anxious. And to be able to give them a safe space to calm down and re-engage, and then they come back on their own. But if I don't provide that space, my inclusive practice doesn't give me the option to say, we want you as part of us, but here's a place that you can be where you can feel safe for a minute.
I see.
Then their behavior ramps up. If I don't provide that, they're less likely to learn. So yeah, inclusivity still impacts those people.
Yeah, and so I think this also highlights the importance of the teachers to see and start recognizing the different disabilities that students might have, including the various forms of invincible disability, because a child might appear as lazy or not excited or just sit around in the corner, and we might think, the child doesn't want to socialize, but it can also be a sign of something going on that the teacher can then respond to, right?
That's right. And I think when we provide the right kinds of supports to teachers and the right kinds of training, we'll raise their awareness to be able to spot problems long before they become more severe. And so we'll get teachers that are more responsive. We're still working on that in the United States, is to teach teachers to be sensitive to the needs of the students. But they need to have eyes to see. And without training, they don't have those eyes to see.
Yeah, that's true. That's correct. Okay, so if there is, I have some questions still, but let's open for the audience. Oh, so many hands. Okay, so let's start from here, Ibu. And then Bapak and the gentleman at the back. And the Ibu at the back. Yes, please mention your name, perhaps.
Okay, thank you so much. My name is Citra Sri Maulidina. I'm from State University of Jakarta, Universitas Negeri Jakarta. I am a young lecturer in special education major. Last Monday we met Mr. And then I want to share something. Actually, every year as a special education major in university, we give some training. We give some training for teacher in regular school or even inclusive school. And also we have collaboration with education ministry. But education ministry also give regis for all teacher in inclusive school who want to attend, who want to join the training. But in the fact, just teacher with guidance and counseling teacher just join that training. But regular teacher they didn't want to join because they think that it's not my obligation or something, it's not my obligatory, and they don't want and they don't realize yet about the children with special needs. And actually for next year, maybe our government also wants to make like an application in the phone or even platform about inclusive schools, so all teacher in regular classroom can join or even get more knowledge about how children with special needs learn or something. And I guess it's really helpful for us as a lecture also to give material about inclusive education in a school, and also all teacher can access about inclusive education. So yeah, just that. Thank you so
Wonderful.
much.
Ibu.
Yeah,
Ibu Citra, thank you so much. So already some programs coming up and resources that people can access. Perhaps you can respond to.
Yeah, when we met with ministry officials, they are well ahead of the game here. I was so impressed with their forethinking about who's going to need it and what the training needs to be and the curriculum they've already developed. We were very impressed by ministry officials and in their forethought. And so I think you're going to see some wonderful training roll out in the coming months and in the coming year. And but I want to address the first part of what you said. As an inclusive teacher or a teacher in a regular classroom, it's scary. And so, and I'm just trying to help you understand the mind that I've seen in some of them, that I see in my own students. and it's rumored even when somebody says, I'm going to be an elementary teacher, and I'm thinking about getting a special ed minor. The common thing that they're said, well, if you do that, you're going to spend your whole career in special ed. And so they say, oh, well, then I won't minor in special ed because I don't want to spend my whole career doing special ed. And I think that isn't true. I think that's a false notion. I think we need to send the message to our students and to teachers. Having the additional training will not only help you with a child with a disability, but it'll help you meet the needs of all those other at-risk children that are already in your classroom. It's going to make you a better teacher and make you more powerful in what you teach.
That's an interesting perspective, important message. Okay, Bapak, for the second question. Okay, let's go to the back and then later on to you.
Okay, thank you so much for your presentation, sir. It's incredible, and I would like to continue for the question from Ms. Chitra. Yeah, I think, she said that it's difficult for teachers to get a knowledge about inclusive education. How about if this institution like America collaborate together with the Ministry of Education and comes to the institution of education in province, the push the regular teachers to come to the seminar like this. I think they welcome regular teachers to the seminar because of the push by the institution, the headmaster. I believe that they will come. But my question in this time, I would like to ask about, can you share about the school in America? Based on your research, which one is the best inclusive student should study in inclusive school or regular school? Because I'm as a teacher, I saw the phenomenon. My student is autism and lower IQ. Then after he has already studied for about 6 months, they got like motivation. Then because of maybe bullying from their friends, actually we have already given advice to their friend, please understand him. But the reality, the inclusive students feel uncomfortable with their friend. So my question is, based on your research in America, which one is the best for inclusive student? Should they study in regular school or inclusive school? Which one is the best? Thank you so much.
So your question really is are there model schools out there? Am I understanding that right? And yes, there are some great model schools in the United States, and they're all over the place. Mm-hmm. And they tend to be centered in larger cities. Rural areas tend to always lack in terms of developing the practice. And that will be the case probably here in Indonesia. The further you get away from Jakarta, it'll be harder to have these practices implemented. And in Jakarta, in your bigger cities, it'll be easier. Even here in Indonesia, we saw some schools that were remarkable, that would rival things that we're doing in the United States. And so I think you just need to look for those and to celebrate them and then have those model schools be able to demonstrate for others who are still trying to do this how to do it. The model schools will help lead the way for other schools, because some of the teachers and the principals of schools are going to think, yeah, this is all good on paper, but I don't think we can really do this. But when they see a school actually doing it, they'll say, oh, wow, we can do it. If they can do it, we can do it. And especially if that school is similar to their own school. I mean, wealthy schools, we say, well, yeah, you can do it, but it's because you have money. But when we develop model schools that are similar across the nation, they'll be the ones that help lead the way because they'll show that it's possible. And that'll be important to put those model schools in the public light and to be able to say, do you see this school? They're doing it, and to celebrate those achievements. And it's already happening here in Indonesia.
How about the comparison between inclusive schools and special ed schools? If there's a possibility that students might be bullied in the inclusive schools?
You're going to see a movement away from having special ed schools at all. Because as we get better at including children in inclusive schools, there'll be no need for special schools. Now, it won't mean that they go away 100%. You're still going to have some children that need so much extra services that we can't provide it in an inclusive school. But it needs to be a rare event. That's where we go back to that principle of least restrictive environment. Children have a right to be educated with the friends from their neighborhood. If they're in a special school, they're not with their friends. They may have friends they've developed at that school, but they're not with the children from their neighborhood. And I think that's the movement that you'll need to see happen to meet that principle, is to say we need to include every child with a disability in an inclusive school, not a special school.
So the key is to create a good, positive environment in the inclusive school.
That's right. Yeah, that welcomes them, and the more that happens, the less you'll see bullying occurring, and the more that the hearts and the minds of everybody in the school will change. They'll think, we can do this, and they'll begin to support the process, and the children with disabilities will begin to make more friends, and you'll see a positive change.
Okay. Let's go to the question here from the gentleman at the first row. Yeah, Bapak.
Hello, my name is Ariski Ramadan. I'm from Memento Game Studio. So our studio, open commission, and usually our customer is asking for educational games. So one time we have a customer that asked us to make an AI teacher to assist the teacher so that it can teach anyone, anywhere. And what's your opinion about that in the term of inclusivity? Thank you.
That's a great question. And I think we're going to see some real significant change just within the next 5 years. We're already seeing changes in AI helping doctors to make diagnoses, right? So I think you're going to see AI begin to help drive change and become a resource for teachers, but not just teachers, for administrators, for parents, for students at the university. AI is going to help us make those changes and become a real resource to help put the information that's already out there closer to the fingertips of the people who need to use it. Yeah, I think that's a great thing. Do it. Make that happen.
Definitely would be interesting to have game embedded within the education process as well, right?
Yes, and those exist in the United States.
Wow.
And so just keep trying. He's gonna be one of the leaders out there that creates games that help disabled children to learn.
Yes, wonderful.
Because games, children automatically engage in a game environment, don't they? Especially when they're winning things, right? The tokens that come through the game. So yeah, if we can do that in Indonesian, yeah, that'd be awesome. And there's money in it.
True.
So there's good reason, not just to help children with disabilities,
Yes.
but there's money in it.
Wonderful. An idea already, bear fruit here in this discussion. We have one question from the lady at the back.
Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm a teacher in an inclusive school. So actually, I teach German. Yeah, and in my class, there is one student that cannot hear clearly, and there are 2 students. There are slow learners. Besides German teacher, I also shadow teacher. So there is one student. He has mixed blood parents, so his mother from England, and his father from Indonesian. So this student has difficulty to understand the learning materials because our school is not a bilingual school. So the teacher teach in Bahasa and the learning materials all in Bahasa. So there are some difficulties that I experience. So, for example, when I prepare the exam, so you said that if I'm not mistaken, so we shouldn't lower the standard. But I think it's very difficult for this student when we don't lower the standard. For example, in math, we learn about fractions, but the student can understand just subtraction and then addition, something like that. So yeah, it's kind of difficult for this student, I think. So, and my question is, what do you think about the role of a shadow teacher? What should we do? So when we make exam, should the main teacher make the question for these special needs students, or the shadow teacher should make the exam for the special needs students? Thank you so much.
Thank you for a wonderful question. Yes, Dr. Cloward, what do you think?
Well, I'm impressed with
Yeah.
with everything you're doing. That's wonderful. I would answer that in a couple of different ways. One, we've known now for a decade or so that when I can get a regular teacher and a special ed teacher to co-teach together, that I have better learning outcomes, not for just my disabled children, but for all the children in the class. So, but it takes extra time and extra planning outside of class. So I would say neither one of you does it by yourself. You do it together. And so that will help you because you're the content expert. The other teacher is the expert on disabilities. And by doing it together, you'll produce something better than either one of you could do by yourself. So I think that's an important thing, is to collaborate and co-teach whenever possible. The second part of the question that I wanted to address is, I have a standard here and it's probably not attainable by all students. That doesn't mean I change the standard. What it does mean is I change the goals and how I get them there. In fact, let me jump to a slide that I think would help here. So this is what we call a prompting hierarchy. And in this prompting hierarchy, we go from more intrusive to less intrusive, and from more dependent on help to more independent. The goal is to be independent and self-reliant. And so when I could start at any level in this prompting hierarchy, but I'm going to start based on the needs of the child. So if the child, for example, is struggling to learn how to write, I may use a full physical assist. And I might take my hand and put it over their hand and help them. That'd be clear up there. That's very intrusive. To be able to reach and touch a child, that's intrusive to what they're doing, right? So I don't want to be up there unless I have to be there. And then but within a short time with physical assist, I'm gonna be able to say just a partial assist. Where I don't hold their hand, I just touch their elbow or hold their arm, and so on. I'm gonna move down through these until they can spontaneously do it by themselves. And I think that's what you have to do with the child, or the three students you were talking about, is to say, where are they? And how do I support them? And you don't always move down through these and then don't go back. You'll come down through them for some things, and then you'll have to go back for other things, and then down again. But the goal always to making them independent. So this is called a prompting hierarchy. And there's lots of research out there about this that you can go read. In fact, I'll try and put some materials up on the website that I gave you to help. The other one that's related to this is the slide before this, that is called gradual release of responsibility. In this case, I'm going to produce, the first triangle is what the teacher does. And the second triangle is the student's responsibility. So I'm going to start by telling the child, I'm going to do this for you. I'm going to show you how. So I'm going to model it for the child. And so that they can see me do it. And I might even have some of the children in the class who already know how to do it well also model it for the child so that I do it. Then I'm going to go to the next level, which is we do it. And I'm going to do it with them, with some support. With the goal then to go to the next level, I'm going to say, okay, you all know how to do it now, but do it as a group. So in groups of students, you all try this, you do it together. And then the last step is to say, okay, you've had a chance to see me do it, you've had a chance to do it with me, you've had a chance to do it in a group, now you do it by yourself. I think these are powerful principles, and they don't just apply to what we do in our classrooms. They apply to what we do with each other. They apply to what I do as a parent, right? If to parent this way is powerful, to be able to say, you can do this long term, but I'm going to help you get to that.
Wonderful. So we can all take note of this wonderful methods and way of thinking and teaching method that all of the teachers that can reflect. I was just thinking as well, she teaches German,
I know.
also a shadow teacher.
I know.
Wow, wonderful.
Amazing.
And yeah.
In fact, can I just add one last
Yes,
little thing? I
definitely.
just want to celebrate teachers.
Yes.
Teachers are remarkable people within our communities. They're the ones that change what we do long term. And they don't get enough thanks.
Mm-hmm.
They spend long days, oftentimes into the night. After everybody else has stopped doing their work, teachers are often still going. I know because I'm a teacher. And my wife teaches 3rd grade. And we oftentimes sit at the table on Saturdays, still preparing to teach. Teachers are awesome. And I'm glad that you understand that. And I hope the whole community would understand how important teachers are in creating positive change for us as a nation. Well done. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's give a round of applause. I think with that, because of the limited time, we have to end our discussion here. But again, I would just like to say thank you, Dr. Dean Cloward.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you. I think it's important to note that we should end the session with a huge thank you to all of the teachers.
Yes. Let's have the teachers stand up.
Yes, let's celebrate the teachers. Stand up, teachers. Thank you so much for all of the hard work that all teachers are doing here in Indonesia. Thank you, and I will return the floor to the MC.
All right, thank you so much to Dr. Dean Cloward and Dr. Astrid Sarasvati for the very empowering discussions today. And I would like to appreciate everyone joining us today online and on site. And also, I would like to appreciate every teachers and lecturers as well here. And we hope that everyone get a lot of inspiration and motivation to transform our class into a more inclusive classroom for our students. And previously we had a social media quiz, and the question was, what does inclusive education primarily aim to achieve? And the answer is C, equal access to quality education. Shout out goes to @Tiara Azahra, username below, from Instagram for answering the questions correctly. And for those of you who are interested to know more and attending more events at America, kindly visit our website at www.atamerica.or.id. And also don't forget to follow our social media pages and YouTube channels as well. We're on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube channel AT America. Again, thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Farah Shiba, and see you at the next At America event. Goodbye.